is the mustard that built empires.
Each place, each region, each food has its own story to tell.
Hey! It's the most dangerous kind of farming I've ever known. I would rather fish for shark.
I'm exploring Britain to discover how our soils and seas have shaped our tastes and traditions. Because our food is who we are.
Those were the shoes that were put on the cattle, so they would fit those.
They really shoot cattle?
They are.
Alongside me on this journey are historian Lucy Worsley, archaeologist Alex Langlands.
Definitely whiskey in that. And does that find its way into the fish ultimately?
It does, yeah.
Botanist James Wong and horticulturalist Alice Fowler.
Oh wow, it's a totally different thing when it's cooked.
It is, it really is.
This is the story of our food. This time, we're in Kent. This is the Garden of England, rich with orchards and fruitful harvests. It's also on the doorstep of Europe, a source of new tastes and ideas. And it's all within easy reach of the markets of London via an ancient network of rivers and estuaries.
What's the great thing about falling off here?
Well, if you go, remember to go that way.
I'm going to be travelling by traditional Thames barge, taking a trip up the Medway to see how the white van men of the waterways helped put Kentish food on the map. But my journey begins in the heart of the county. I'm starting with a crop perfectly suited to Kent's soil and climate, a crop brought here from Europe to transform our national drink.
These amazing towering plants are hops, and their pale green flowers are the beginnings of a very Kentish taste, because they're what gives English beer its bitterness, the clean, grassy, palate-cleansing tang that makes British beer, beer.
Hops are a very labour-intensive crop, grown purely for their cone-like flowers. Kent became their stronghold thanks to favourable growing conditions and the number of seasonal workers prepared to travel from nearby London. Whole families would race to pick the hop flowers that were then dried before being added in the brewing process to create flavour. Hop farmer Chris Nicholas has just started this year's harvest.
I guess you know when they're ready because of the timing, but is there anything, how can you tell that this particular, this fellow, how do you know it's ready? Is there anything?
Well, the traditional way is, if you look at a hop,
Yeah.
there's a seed.
Mm-hmm.
When the hop first forms, the seed inside is milky. As the hop becomes ready, the seed starts to dry out. You can see the lupulin, which is the brewing value, on the petals.
Is that the yellow stuff?
The yellow stuff, yeah. Now the seed is not milky, it's actually quite firm. That means it's ripe.
How many hop flowers do you need for a pint of beer?
Just a couple.
Just a couple?
Yeah.
So like, boom, these two, that's a pint.
Yeah.
It smells of very hoppy beer.
Yeah.
When it's on your fingers. It smells sort of garlicky when you first smell it, and then lemony, and when it's on your fingers, it smells like I've come back from a really, really good night.
You can flavour beer with fresh green hops, but usually they're dried. This would once have been done in an oast house, but these days they're dried in kilns.
So you dry them here? This is
This is part of the drying system. The hop is 83% water, and we try and dry them down to 10%. To tell when they're dried, I guess get into the kiln while it's going, you grab a handful, and then you rub them. These aren't anywhere near ready. These are about half dried. And what will happen, you'll end up with, if you've got end up with three of just the strigs left in your hand, that's 10% moisture. That's how the old Victorian dryers dried hops.
And you still do it that way?
Still do it that way. It's done all over the world, all hop dryers. They might have got electronic equipment, but it's always still done by hand.
It's a very kind of heady smell, isn't it? It's very kind of, whoa, makes you feel a bit woozly.
Hops and beer have been the perfect Kentish partnership for centuries, but go back further into history, and the story is very different. Brewing has been going on for millennia. It's a way of making our water safer to drink, but hops weren't always part of the recipe. In medieval England, there were no hop gardens, and beer as we know it simply didn't exist. Master brewer Stuart Main is going to introduce me to the original British pint.
What was beer like before hops?
It would be very variable. It would be called ale. It was only called beer when hops were added. Before that was ale. And ale-wise, women used to brew the beers. Women these days, it was a farmhouse kind of thing.
We now, when we talk about real ale,
Yeah.
we do mean a hopped drink like beer,
Yes,
don't
we do. Yes, we do.
But
Yes.
at the time, there was a distinction.
We're looking at the alcoholic beverage before hops came to this country.
Malted milled grain is mixed with boiling water.
It's a lot of trouble to go through just because you can't drink the water.
Well, it's that or dying, I suppose, so it's what would you choose?
beer or death.
It's just a wholesome, natural drink. It doesn't have to be highly alcoholic.
Children drank it, didn't they?
They would drink it as well, of course they would.
Flavourings like rosemary, honey and heather are added.
I have to say that I don't think I've ever seen anything that looks less like beer.
It's ale, lad. It's ale.
It's left to ferment for several days.
Now you can see how it looks exactly the same, but you see the fluid in there. Now what they do, they allow that to sediment out. So
I bet they would, because what they've got there is a yeasty-smelling muddy puddle.
But it's not going to kill you. We'll just see how this tastes.
It smells of mouldy bread,
Yeah.
but it tastes a
Well,
bit...
you can imagine that chilled, nicely cool. That's a lovely drink. Even though it's
Yeah, so you're going to have such a big
It's
sales problem with the colour, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, what do you think the alcoholic content of that is?
6.
6. Would you be surprised if I told you it was 13?
Yes.
13%.
Really?
Honestly.
Gosh, I
13%.
drink too much, don't I?
Although our British ale was alcoholic, it was unpredictable and it spoiled quickly. The Europeans were really
The Britain's way of life. It's a national drink.
Kent has a long history of embracing new ideas and flavours, but it didn't hurt that it had thousands of customers practically on its doorstep. So for brewing to work commercially, Kent needed another ingredient: transport. The brewery sits on a tidal creek in Faversham that leads out into the Swale estuary.
Morning, Brian.
Good morning.
Beer run to...
Beer run to
London.
London. Well, thank you very much indeed. That would get us halfway anyway.
Brian Payne is the skipper and owner of this barge, the Lady of the Lee. He and his crew are going to show me how Kent used to get goods to market.
Well, when you're sailing in barge matches, it's very, very thirsty work. Lots of pulling and heaving, and with the crew is in danger of getting very dehydrated.
Those were very easy. I thought it was the whole point.
Oh, they're easy. Yes, well, you'll find out later.
Before modern roads and railways, barges were the safest and cheapest method of putting Kent's food on the table. This network of rivers and estuaries were once the motorways of their day.
So do we know what route we're taking then? So
I think we do. If not, I've got a road map of Britain down below, so I'm sure I can find a way.
In their heyday, there were over 2,000 of these barges, the largest fleet in Europe. They could navigate narrow creeks to pick up goods direct from farmers and suppliers.
I'm amazed we're out so quickly. But seconds ago, we were in the bustling, glittering lights of Faversham.
Yes,
and now
yes.
suddenly we're out open fields. It's like
Open
Belgium
fields.
or something, isn't it?
Yes. It's got a strange beauty around here, the marshes.
The earliest barges were simple floating boxes rowed to shore, but bargemen soon realised that they could be transformed to sail the windswept estuaries. A sailing rig was added, and the Thames barge was born.
Right.
So what sail are you going to put up then?
Well,
like
I think
I know the difference between
Well,
sails.
we're actually going to put the topsail up, and the clue's in the name. The great thing is if you fall off here...
What's the great thing about falling off here?
Well, if you go, remember to go that way, and you'll be in the water.
Is it deep enough that I'll be okay?
Oh, you'll be fine.
Do you want to see a back somersault with a triple pike just in time for the Olympics?
Yeah.
Would you like to know just how terrified I am?
Beer from the brewery would have been delivered straight to London, but we're setting sail for a different destination, heading to the River Medway and a journey upriver into the very heart of Kent. This is where Kent's reputation was really built. Grapes and apples are all very well, but by late summer, it's cherries that are the real stars of the show. Kent led the way with the first English cherry orchards in the early 16th century, and it's still leading the way today. Horticulturalist Alice Fowler is uncovering a new cherry revolution with its roots firmly in the past.
Now this is a traditional orchard with traditional wide spacing and huge trees, hence the need for these very, very tall ladders. The ladders have a wonderful feel though. You can sort of tell that hundreds of people have climbed up and down them and they're stained this sort of brilliant dark cherry red along each rung.
This is Kent farming with a rich history. John Lee Pemberton's family have been growing cherries here for more than 3 generations. And, as with any old orchard, the fruit trees can tell their own stories.
If you have a look around this side here, you can see where it's growing out of the, it's growing out of the lower part of the tree. And what's happened is that The graft is here. That's where the top stock was put onto the tree. This is the rootstock. This is shot out from beneath, and it's showing its true form, which is that it's a wild cherry tree, and it's got these little sour wild fruits on, with tiny stones and tiny pips. And it is from this that the cultivated cherries have developed, and probably, if you look up in here, I mean, that's a cultivated cherry.
Oh yeah, that's a huge difference in size.
Huge difference from these little tiny things that we've got now.
And the wild cherry is native to Britain, and we've actually always eaten it. It's one of our early foraged foods because there's evidence in Bronze Age sites and stuff like that. But when did we go from eating this to eating this?
The Romans, I think, were probably the first to start grafting cherries and selecting varieties deliberately and propagating them, because, you see, if you grow from seed, you're only ever going to have one tree of a particular variety. The only way you're going to get lots of trees of the same variety is by grafting.
Yeah.
In the UK, the real start of the fruit industry in Kent was with a chap called Richard Harris, who was Henry VIII's fruiterer.
Harris set up an orchard in nearby Tenham and brought graftwood in from France, all on the orders of a king who wanted a sweeter cherry for his dinner table.
Henry VIII really
he backed it. He backed it. He saw it as part of his sort of attempt to modernise the country, and I think probably he'd seen the French were doing it better and thought that we've got to do something about it. There's a wonderful description in William Lambart's Perambulation of Kent, which is was one of the first county guides written in 1570 of Richard Harris's orchards, and it says, "In the year of our Lord Christ 1533, he obtained 105 acres of good ground in Tenham, which he divided into 10 parcels, and with great care, good choice, and no small labour and cost, brought plants from beyond the seas, and furnished this ground with them so beautifully as they not only stand in most right line, but seem to be of one sort, shape, and fashion, as if they'd been drawn through one mould or wrought by one and the same pattern."
This smaller rootstock, isn't it? That was the moment.
Absolutely, for sure. Yep. Suddenly, our picking costs are halved.
Yes.
Suddenly, we have trees that we can manage and prune easily, that we don't need ladders, we don't need anything like that. I mean, these trees are 8 or 9 years old. They're still only this size, and they'll be smaller once we've pruned them after finishing picking. It's completely revolutionised the business.
Kent broke new ground with the first cherry orchards, but the traditional trees pioneered by Henry VIII have had their day. Cherries are part of a bigger story of Kent, a reflection of the willingness of farmers here to embrace new ideas and make them their own.
In the best of both worlds are farmers like John who are going to keep the old orchards going for as long as possible, but invest in the future of cherries. And the future of cherries are small and covered and perfectly ripe.
On the Lady of the Lee, we've reached the coast and are now in full sail.
As I sweat it, you can pull it in, OK?
We've left Faversham far behind and are sailing around the Isle of Sheppey into the Medway estuary.
Are there not nautical songs we could sing?
There are, yes. They've got lots of swear words in there.
Cherries would once have been transported on barges like this. Kent's soil and climate are perfect for growing fruit, and the waterways got it to market before it could spoil. Before heading down the Medway proper, I'm stopping off at an orchard that still has its own wharf.
But that's the line in. After that's in.
Yes. And we're going in there?
Yeah.
You look a little bit more concerned than I thought you would.
No, I was just looking at the way out. That with you there, it must mark the way out as well. You can see itself where the wharf is. You can actually only get to a high water because it's mud there at the moment still.
The Lady of the Lee is designed for shallow waters, provided Brian gets the tides right.
2-foot draft, and there we are aground.
Turns out we're a little early.
Theoretically, there should be another 3 foot of water before high water, so there should be just enough to get on that jetty. Lovely. No, do. Heave.
Aha, Robert. Welcome, Joss. Not my transport.
Yeah, it's lovely, isn't it?
This is Shoregate Wharf, And the orchards that run down to it are owned by fourth-generation fruit farmer Robert Hinge.
And what are these? I mean, these are apples. Don't tell me.
Yeah, these are coxes.
Right. And that's am I allowed to eat them? Is that? Can you sell that? Is that a bit small?
No, that's fine. A bit sharp. We're here about a week earlier, I think.
It's delicious, amazing. So you don't use DSG anymore?
No, it's all done by road now, but it would have been done years ago. My grandfather, great-grandfather, and fruit would have been taken up to London, and the organic matter manure would have come back and ploughed into the fields.
In order to create nice little apples like that. But is there any other reason then? I mean, why Kent now?
Well, we're more of a continental climate, so it is warmer and tends to be a bit drier here as well.
And you just grow sort of old-fashioned varieties like this?
No. We still grow a lot of them, but more and more we're planting Gala, Braeburn, Jazz. Jazz, yeah.
Come along now.
Around 2/3 of tree-grown fruit in Britain now comes from Kent, and Robert is a major commercial supplier of varieties both old and new.
This is a traditional variety, Worcester, which we've just finished picking. Tremendous flavour.
I've never heard of a Worcester.
Yeah. Beautiful, perfumey flavour.
Yeah. Mild, though.
Yeah.
What's this, a Gala?
Gala, yeah. And is becoming the most widely grown variety now in the country. Totally different texture.
That's much more an apple grown for people who prefer to eat sweeties, isn't it?
Yes.
People who like Mars bars, but they know they should eat fruit.
Yep.
So they eat this incredibly accessible, sort of pink, sweet, sugary apple. Children's fruit, grown-ups fruit.
Absolutely right. Okay, well, we've got traditional Bramleys, really the only commercially grown cooking apple now.
Let me eat some raw. I like a raw
sure?
Bramley. Yeah.
Make
your eyes water.
Yeah, will do.
A wasabi of an apple.
Nice with a bit of cheese. And a pound of sugar.
Wow.
Robert's apples now make their way to market by road, but here, in this orchard, it's easy to see how the waterways help put Kentish food on the table. Apples could be loaded onto barges and make it to London in less than 12 hours. But that's not where I'm headed.
Hey, Brian.
Oh, hello.
Produce?
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'm following the Medway further upstream, into the heart of the county. Fruit is only part of Kent's story. To the south, rolling chalk gives way to open marshland. But this is an important part of the Garden of England too. Archaeologist Alex Langlands is discovering how farming has left its mark on this seemingly wild landscape.
You're never far from a dike or ditch out here on Romney Marsh, and that's because all of this land around us has been reclaimed from the sea. The present coastline today lies some 5 miles in a southerly direction.
This 100 square mile stretch of marshland is difficult to cultivate and is vulnerable to flooding and disease.
In the hot summer months, these ditches would have held stagnant water, and they in turn would have proved a fertile breeding ground for malaria-carrying mosquitoes and all sorts of diseases, things like cholera, dysentery. They would have been rife. And in fact, 1 in 3 babies never lived to see their first birthday. So it's a pretty desolate place at that time.
It's hard to imagine what could possibly prosper in this treacherous environment. But this landscape actually holds some of the richest pasture land in Kent. And the one creature that positively thrives on it is the Romney Marsh sheep. Hardy and nimble, the Romneys have allowed farmers to make the most of this marsh for centuries, converting grass into valuable meat and wool.
You're going to show me how to catch a sheep now.
6th generation farmer Howard Bates is continuing the tradition, and today it's time to check the flock.
You've always got to catch the one that wants to be caught. That's the first.
Yeah.
Right, let's catch this one here.
Lovely. Now that is how you catch a sheep. So what are you looking for then in a good Romney sheep?
OK, well, we'll start right at the front. They've got to have a good mouth, right square muzzle so she can graze this grass nice and short.
Yep.
All the higher value meat is in the back of the animal.
Right.
You want this triangle shape.
OK.
Both from front to back.
Yep.
And from the top of the sheep.
OK, across the top here. Yeah, a triangle out here and a triangle out here, because I guess all roads are pointing to this sort of rump end.
Yeah, and of course then this triangular shape is far easier laying time. She's beautiful, this sheep. She's just got this nice square muzzle, nice white face, good coat.
So today the plan is to, run them through the race and just check them over for condition?
Yeah, they've got to have a good set of teeth. The udder has got to be sound for milk production next year.
Right, OK.
Yeah. OK, if you just walk back there.
All right, this one, look.
Just walk to her now. I think she'll come up there.
Just doesn't want to go. Come on, you. Come on. No harm here. It's all about your health, sweetheart. So you're just feeling to see if they're missing any molars, yeah? Because, of course, if they can't break the food down properly, then that's going to impact upon milk production, I guess.
Yeah.
Romneys are a dual-purpose breed, used for both their meat and wool. Nowadays, it's the meat that makes the money, but their fast-growing fleece was once a prized commodity.
It's got a lovely long staple as well, hasn't it?
Lovely long staple.
I mean, look at that.
Remembering that this is only a few months of growth. These were shorn in July.
Of course, so you've still got the best part of the year still to
Absolutely, yeah. A Romney staple is about 8 inches long.
That's amazing, isn't it? You're looking at something like that. That's superb, and you begin to understand why it was just so valuable, the wool off of these sheep.
Sure.
Anything else you're checking at this point?
Well, in legislation now, we have to check they've got the correct ear tags.
Right, OK, so you do that. But now that's the only part of this job that isn't something that was practised hundreds of years ago. Otherwise, what we're doing here...
It's been done for...
Hundreds of years here.
Absolutely, yeah.
With this breed of sheep on this marsh.
Absolutely.
What has changed for Howard, and for the few remaining sheep farmers on the marsh, is that they get to go home at night. Until the 1930s, at certain times of the year, farmers would need to live out on the marsh to tend their sheep. This difficult and dangerous job was often delegated to freelance farmhands, called lookers. Their legacy is preserved by local sheep farmer Dennis Cole.
Well, the lookers, of course, they call them lookers on Romney Marsh instead of shepherds, because very often the looker looks after 2 or 3 flocks for the rich owners that lived on the hill, because it's not such a healthy place to live down here.
So that's the difference then between a looker and a shepherd?
Yeah, that's right. It's not that he's any better looking.
Right. Is that what they tell you?
Whilst tending the flocks in his care, the looker would roam this wide, open marshland with little to interrupt the landscape other than these curious brick huts.
Wow. This is lovely. So what were these huts used for then, Dennis?
Well, it was for the looker to stay in during the lambing period, really, to look after the sheep.
And of course you need to be close to the sheep at this time of year, because when they're lambing, they could lamb in the middle of the night, couldn't they?
Yeah, that's right. And if you got the odd weekly lamb, you could bring it in front of the fire and get it going again.
It sounds very romantic to me at the moment.
Don't think it was. They worked long hours and it's fairly basic, isn't it? There's no electricity, no plumbing.
In their heyday, there were around 350 lookers' huts on the marsh. Today, barely a dozen are still standing. The Romneys are such a resilient, dependable stock that they've been exported to breed all over the world. And they're still here on the marsh, where they belong. Sheep have helped shape this community and this landscape.
Sure we can pour you a little something? A tough day out there on the marsh.
And they still provide excellent quality meat, which is known for being particularly succulent.
So here we go, we've got a rolled leg of Romney Marsh lamb.
Whoa.
It's probably one of the nicest lamb joints we can get.
That is juicy, and you can see the marbling in there, can't you?
Yeah,
you can
it's
see
fat all the way through it.
I have to say, that's really how I like my lamb, so... That is absolutely delicious, Scott.
Good.
The fats are coming through there, but not in a congealy way, just the taste.
The fat's not completely dissolved.
Yeah.
So it's still very tasty.
Absolutely stunning.
Good.
Now I know what keeps you here on the marsh. That is delicious.
On my journey through Kent, I've reached Rochester, where the Medway starts to narrow. Barges like this could ply their trade in the estuaries, but they were also designed to sail upriver.
Hey, do what? I've forgotten.
Just turn it a bit.
Turn it a bit.
OK, Charles, hold it there.
Like that?
Yeah, so...
That meant they needed to be adaptable, because rivers have bridges.
We're coming up to Rochester Bridge, where we've got to lower all the gear flat on deck, because the problem of the bridge being lower than the mast, you see.
Because time and tide were of the essence, bargemen would hire in specialists known as hufflers to quickly lower the mast.
A huffler?
Fortunately for me, there's still one available.
Well, huffle away, mate, huffle away.
He's the great-grandson of the hufflers that have been huffling on the Medway for years. Centuries, probably.
The The Hufflers were tall, powerful men who would row out and lower the mast for a fee. The aim was to try and shoot the bridges, the barge sailing on while the Huffler lowered the gear.
I've got to say, I've heard all these stories about how they shot the bridge, they didn't stop moving, the Hufflers ran out, put it down.
That's why there's only a training Huffler.
It does solve one mystery, though, how they get a ship in a bottle.
Yes, it does.
We could go straight into a bottle of cognac and we'd be away.
Absolutely, and have a whale of a time in there, I think.
We're following the Medway inland towards the orchards and wharves once visited regularly by barges like the Lady of the Lee. Traditional crops like hops and fruit still have their place here, but history has shown Kentish farmers are never afraid to embrace new ideas, even when they turn out to be old ones. To the west, in the Darrant Valley, a sea of indigo is in full bloom. Botanist James Wong has gone to learn about a very fragrant and flavourful modern Kent crop.
Look at this. I think the first thing you notice when you walk into this almost big purple haze is the scent that really hits you in the face, and almost psychedelically purple. God, that's good. You feel like you've been dropped inside one of those French Impressionist paintings, Mary Poppins style. And, you know, when I was growing up, French Impressionist paintings were my only knowledge of lavender. I grew up on the other side of the world in tropical Asia, and it is brilliant to walk into one of them.
Lavender has a great flavour and a long history in our kitchens as well as in our medicine cabinets. Queen Elizabeth I loved lavender and had a particular fondness for lavender jams, jellies and teas. It's not really so strange when you think about it. Lavender is a member of the mint family, a close relative of rosemary, sage and thyme, all flavours we use regularly today.
People have preconceived ideas about lavender. They think about it as these little grains that you find in the sachets in your granny's linen cupboard. But it's so much more exciting than that. It has a whole raft of chemicals, 150 different chemicals, that give it different medicinal qualities. Everything from being antibacterial to antifungal to even anti-inflammatory. And you could almost argue that the reason why we're so drawn to its scent and flavour is it's the same chemicals that give it these medicinal qualities that have that scent and flavour. So we've almost been hardwired instinctively to find chemicals like this exciting and want to consume them.
Lavender is a Mediterranean plant, most likely first brought here by the Romans. It was grown in kitchen gardens and then on a larger scale in the 19th century in the southern suburbs of London, until rising land prices squeezed it out of business. But modern Kentish farmers are just as enterprising as their predecessors and saw a gap in the market. Less than 20 years ago, Caroline Alexander helped this extraordinary crop find a home right here, and it's thrived. She grows it for pharmaceuticals and as a flavouring.
Yeah. Well, there's more lavender grown in Kent than any other county in the UK, which is great.
Yeah, rows and rows of the stuff. I bet you're glad you're not having to do it by hand. You've got that fancy machine to do it for you.
Absolutely.
It's so beautiful to see a field so intensely purple. But how do you know when to harvest? Is it literally just the colour when it changes?
Yeah, it's partly the intensity of the colour which just grows as the season progresses over these few weeks. But in particular, it's just the exact flowering stage that you get to. If I show you one of those, what we've got there is on the flowering stem. You've got about a third of it is still in bud, a third of it is in full flower, and then a third of it is just beginning to go over.
So that's a perfect description for when it's at the midpoint of flowering, not at the beginning, not at the end.
Yeah, exactly. Maximum oil yield stage. And if it goes on beyond that, then there's the risk of it shedding and dropping onto the ground, and then we've lost it.
So that's interesting. You're not growing lavender for its flowers almost. You're growing it for its oil. So
Exactly.
that's exact right stage.
Exactly.
Lavender is well suited to the free-draining chalk soil and rolling hills of the North Kent Downs. The conditions mean the flowers are particularly rich in oil. Caroline's husband William runs a distillery on site.
Well, we've just brought this trailer in full of about 6 tonne of lavender flowers, and we're now connecting onto the steam because ingeniously we use this as the still pot in the distillation process. And the steam, you can hear it and see it there now, going into the trailer. It's got a special floor, and that allows the steam to go through all the plant materials. It opens up the cells and lifts the lavender, which then exits through the chimney up there and through into the separation unit.
It all does it in one kind of pressure cook away.
We've taken a lot of hard back-breaking work out of this by inventing and developing a system which enables us to do large quantities.
And you don't lose a single drop?
No, we keep it all.
So all the cooked lavender's left over in here, and all the good stuff is being pumped up in gas form through there?
Exactly that.
Fantastic. I can't wait to see what's in there.
Come this way. So
wow.
this is the steam condenser, and already we're starting to get some liquid out. It's pushing out the air that was in the trailer, and that's all this sort of steam. but now we can see it's condensing to a liquid, a mixture of oil and water. And the way we separate it is oil floats on water.
Yeah.
So we just allow it to float on water in this tank.
Yeah.
And already you can see the oil rising to the top.
I've never seen that much essential oil.
Yeah, well, it will build in this tank so that we get, 40 litres or so.
Wow. How much lavender do you have to put in to get 40 litres of essential oil?
5 or 6 tonnes, but it depends on variety.
Yeah.
So that's the first oil, and it pours off initially. You get a lot of oil in the first 15 minutes of distillation.
And I normally know essential oil from those tiny little 10 or 5 millilitre bottles. And that's litres and litres.
Yeah.
In fact, it's so strong, my eyes are watering.
It's really strong at this stage.
Yeah, it's all mixed in with the air. The second you walk in, you're really hit in the face by the amount of it. It's incredible to believe that was fresh plant material half an hour ago.
Caroline and William produce essential oil for pharmaceutical use, but they also process it for food production. They turn it into a water-soluble essence, which is easier to cook with. It's a modern twist on an old ingredient.
So, Matt, I hear you're a bit of a local food hero.
And Matthew Kearsley-Lawson has used it to bring back a Victorian recipe for lavender conserve.
So my question is, why am I slicing up apples?
It's because you have to. The base of the jelly is all Kentish Bramley apples. That's the bulk of it. That's
all the
fine.
core and peel and everything
the
on
whole
there?
lot, yeah.
Because that's what contains the pectin, I guess, which is what's going to make stuff set.
The lavender's right at the end, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, because this is the pulp here.
And why did you add the lavender at the end? Just out of interest.
Purely because if you add it too early, you'll cook it away. You'll cook away the flavour.
Yeah, the flavours are volatile oils, and as you heat them, I guess they evaporate off into the air.
They will do,
Your kitchen will smell lovely, but your jam won't taste of it.
That's right at the end.
And it's strange, because lavender, we think about it as something that's really quite unusual to use in food and quite modern and quite cool.
Yeah.
But at one point, it would have been a real staple of the kitchen, You'd have it just as common as rosemary, parsley, sage, all those common kitchen herbs. This would have been, right up there as one of them.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right with the lavender jelly. I mean, people put it on pork, on lamb, and things like that. If you want to be very posh, you can have it on croissants and scones.
Ooh, fantastic.
Even one customer said you put it on cheese on toast.
Excellent. So it's kind of a sweet and savoury thing.
Yes.
So I guess that works. So it's got floral stuff which works with sweet, but at the same time it contains the same chemicals that are in things like pine and eucalyptus and rosemary, so it has that kind of herbal flavour.
Exactly.
Right. Proof's in the pudding.
That's it. Yep.
Wow.
Yep. I know. It's surprising, isn't it? Yeah.
With the apples and the plums
Yeah.
and lemons and everything, it almost kind of has a mince-meaty kind of flavour.
Yes,
It's
yeah.
kind of sweet and spicy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's really
Yeah.
familiar. It doesn't taste like anything too kind of out there and
Yeah.
crazy. Oh, go on, pile it
Go
on.
I can see you enjoyed
Oh,
that so
baby.
much.
Fantastic.
On the Medway, we've reached Allington Lock, where the tidal waters end. The river was so important to transporting food and goods into and out of Kent that locks were built to make it navigable as far as Tunbridge. Cargoes were closely monitored and tolls were charged. Tim Benger is the current lockkeeper, and he's still collecting money today.
Hey, how you doing?
Very good, very good. Looking forward to paying you some money.
Always, always. You'll come up to the office, we'll sort the license out.
So how much is it?
It all depends on the length of time you're staying and how long the boat is.
I'm passing through.
Yeah, passing through. Just pay for a daily licence. You're bigger than 11 metres.
Thank you.
So you stick a signature on there, sir.
So how long have they been told for coming through here then?
Ever since this was put in place and they was able to stop boats, work them, take the details and pay the fees. These are the original ledgers. I mean, we can open up some pages. You see here, lists.
And this is the stuff
List of vessels that used to come through. List what those carrying. So you've got fruit, timber, coal.
And when is this? This is only...
This is 1960.
Right. So as recently as 1960, they still use the canal to...
Absolutely. I think it was about the mid-70s they stopped using it as a commercial venture. These are copies of goods inwards ledgers. These go back to the 1800s.
No, we see that. That's nice handwriting.
If you can.
You see, they cared.
But you can see it's hops, seed, maize.
Here, at this point, they were just charging them for going past.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. They were just paid a toll.
That's quite... And you still do it today? Probably the traffic wardens of the water.
Oh, don't say that.
Soink! Well, there we are, that's done. About 18 quid you owe me.
These waterways were once the lifeblood of Kent. They connected it to market and made its food famous. I'm sailing on further inland in search of a uniquely Kentish harvest. But there are also riches to be found on the coast. To the east, shingle beaches shelve gently out to sea. Historian Lucy Worsley is searching for one of the most ancient foods this county has to offer, a food that has helped shape people's lives here for centuries.
Now, imagine you are a Neanderthal person wandering along this beach. There's lots to eat here, if you can find it, just lying on the shore. Mussels, all sorts of stuff, and if you're lucky and you know what you're looking for, a delicious oyster. But I reckon that you'd have to be pretty hungry to work out that there was something tasty in there. Now, if you hadn't seen it before, would you eat a blob of grey mucus like that? You'd have to be quite brave to give it a taste, I think. We haven't got many truly indigenous British foods, but they do include shellfish. And here, where the swale meets the sea, that means oysters. The Romans were the first to spot their commercial potential, even shipping them back to Rome for the greatest of feasts. These days, we tend to think of oysters as a luxury, but that wasn't always the way. This coast can tell a story of a food that's fed both rich and poor. By the Victorian era, towns like Whitstable had started to grow fat on the oyster trade. Fishermen were skilled sailors, jostling for space and a daily catch. It's a tradition that still continues today. Richard Green's family are the custodians of the Whitstable Oyster Company, a business that can trace its origins back to the 1400s. They trawl the same oyster beds fishermen have trawled for centuries, looking for the top prize, a native Whitstable oyster. There's a native.
That is it, you've got the touch.
That's a true, proper, genuine, real, absolute native from Whitstable. It looks like a little pony club rosette, doesn't it? It's nice,
it's
neat
like a
little
heart.
thing. Yeah. What do they need to grow well?
Well, they need shallow water, you need brackish water, so you need...
Does that mean a bit salty and a bit clear as well?
Correct, you're correct. You need a lot of nutrients coming off the ground,
Yeah.
which we have here, because we've got these wonderful salt marshes and quite a lot of... You know, you've got the Swale estuary here, not just the Thames,
Yeah.
but it's all the old oyster hands would say most of the goodness for native oysters comes from the Swale. You can see how much work there is just to get.
There's a native.
Well done.
But how many have we caught this afternoon?
I think we've done not bad. It's in the dozens, maybe not the hundreds.
What was the year in which the most oysters went out of Whitstable and up to London?
The peak time, I believe, was about 1860.
And that was the year in which 50 million oysters went up the
That's
river.
it, 50 million
From here
oysters,
to
they
London.
reckon, at least, went to London, yeah.
By the middle of the 19th century, there were nearly 100 oyster fishing boats, or smacks, working out of Whitstable. Catches were landed, sorted, and sent direct to London to be sold on every street corner. Oysters were cheaper than meat. Beef and oyster pie was a Victorian classic. The richer you were, the more beef you added. The poorer you were, the more oysters. It couldn't last. By the 20th century, the industry had begun to burn itself out. Overfishing and 2 winters that froze the seas solid pushed the native oyster to the brink. That is a rock oyster from the Pacific,
Yeah,
isn't
you've got it, rock oyster. Although they've been here, you know, they're pretty indigenous now.
Rock or Pacific oysters were introduced in the 1970s to boost numbers. They grow fast and you can fish them all year round.
That's the native,
That's
the small
native.
one.
That's a really good contrast, isn't
And you
it?
see the difference. With a rock oyster, you've got a much deeper shell. The native oysters are flatter.
Yeah.
And the reason it's flat is because it sits in the mud like that. And, you know, that's what holds it in place.
It's the natives that made Whitstable famous.
This is about as good as you're ever going to get with oysters, really, because it's a good size. This is the native.
This is the Rolls Royce. This is the real thing. Doesn't look like the most beautiful object in the world, does it? The shell's pretty.
I like them.
Okay.
Should have brought some wine, shouldn't I? Just thinking.
It's amazingly sweet. I guess I've just maybe not had very nice oysters before now.